All right, everyone. Welcome to our Breaking Barriers webinar this evening. We will be getting started in just a few minutes. It looks like people are still in the process of joining. As you join, if you would just go ahead and head to the chat feature, if you make sure the to line says to all panelists and attendees, we'd love to know where you're joining us from this evening. So again, go ahead and open the chat, make sure the to line says to all panelists and attendees, and let us know where you're joining us from this evening. We'll get started in just about a couple minutes. It looks like we have people from DC, from Ohio. We'll see where else people are joining us from as we go on. Again, if you're just joining, go ahead and open the chat box. Make sure the to line says to all panelists and attendees, and let us know where you're joining from. Looks like we have people from Florida. I'm from Florida. I love seeing people from here. California, New Jersey. More folks in DC. Always great to have people here with us. All right. Okay. Who else do we have? More people from New Jersey. Good to see you, Melissa, on the She Should Run team. Austin, Texas, also from the She Should Run team. Okay, we're going to give it just about one more minute. Again, make sure that you familiarize yourself with how Zoom works for the webinar. Hit the chat function, make sure it says to all panelists and attendees, and let us know where you're joining us from. We're gonna go ahead and get started in just a moment. As a reminder, we do have closed captioning available. If you hover over your screen, you'll see the closed caption box. Feel free to turn that on if you'd like to see closed captions. That's also going to be shared as information in the chat. So if you'd like to see closed captioning for this event, please do go ahead and take advantage of that. There's also an alternative stream link so that you can just see all of the text at once. Again, that is also available in the chat. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This evening's Breaking Barriers is in celebration of National Hispanic Heritage Month, and we're so excited to be able to join forces with Sigma Lambda Upsilon. A little bit about National Hispanic Heritage Month is it exists to celebrate and recognize the contributions Hispanic Americans have made to American society and culture. That Hispanic and Latinx Americans represent the second largest ethnic group in the United States, and yet when it comes to political representation, Latinas are sitting at about 2.6% of represented seats. Many areas across the United States are still waiting for their first Latina to represent them in any capacity. So today we are again joining with Sigma Lambda Upsilon to host this webinar. We are excited to be joined by Monroe County Legislator Yversha and Cranston City Councilwoman Lammis Vargas, and we'll discuss the challenges, triumphs of seeking office and as an authentic, proud, and prepared Latina. So we're excited to have that conversation today. Before we get started, I'm going to hand it over to our colleagues over at SLU, Izzy and Roxy, to tell us a little bit more about what they've been doing with their work.
Definitely. Thank you, Zarina. So just to give you a little bit of background on SLU, what we do, Sigma Lambda Upsilon, Señoritas Latinas Unidas Sorority Incorporated was founded in 1987, and we're a national Latina-based sorority. And so we really pride ourselves in being an organization of diverse, collegiate, and professional women dedicated to uplifting traditionally marginalized groups, and specifically Latinx people and women. So since 1987, the Hermandad, or sisterhood, has really been an outlet for professional development and personal growth to both not only our hermanas, or sisters, but also those who we touch through our community service and programming. And so SLU is a proud sponsor of our annual Raíces Week, Raíces meaning roots in Spanish. And this is basically a series of programming that's held nationally during the last week of September. And our organization really dedicates this last week of events to a topic or issue that's aligned with our sorority's mission, goals, and ideals. And so the topic is submitted by one of our very own hermanas or a chapter. And then they develop and design the national initiative that's celebrated nationwide. And so this year's theme is Nosotros la Gente, we the people, the power of our voice. And it really focuses on political literacy, voter education, and the magnitude of our collective voice. And so we're super excited to partner with She Should Run, whose mission just beautifully aligns with this. And so thank you for having us. And we're excited to share this program with you and share a little bit about our hermanas and what they do in this political realm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for choosing us to join with. We're so excited to have you all here with us today. So for those of you who don't know about She Should Run, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit that is focused on dramatically increasing the number of women considering a run for office. We know that we're not going to have more women running and therefore representing us unless we're first considering the option of what it would look like for us to run. So we host events just like this to be able to pull back the curtain on what it looks like to run for office and answer questions about the barriers that may stand in our way to getting there. So a couple reminders for today's session. Again, we have closed captioning. If you'd like to utilize that feature, you can check the CC box on the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The stream link is also available in the chat. This session is being recorded, and so you'll be able to view it and share it later. It will also have captioning available at that time. The chat is live the entire time we're in session, so feel free to coordinate, chat, learn from others there. We will also be sharing links to different things that we discuss in the chat throughout today's conversation. And finally, as we move on to the live Q&A session a little bit later, be sure to use the Q&A box. That's, again, at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. The Q&A box is a little bit different than the chat, and it allows me to review all of your questions and make sure I voice them over to our speakers. So again, later on, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and I'll be sure to share those with our speakers. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers, and we'll have a chance to hear a little bit from them at the beginning. So I'll start with Yversha Roman, who at 4 years old was born in Ponce, Puerto Rico, moved to Rochester, New York, and grew up in a single-parent household with extended family. She quickly became aware of the realities of community that shaped her into the resilient woman that she is today. As an alumnus from the Aquinas Institute and Nazareth College, where she studied social work, Yversha has a unique perspective and ability to identify the quality of life concerns within our community. Having lived the realities of poverty, she vows to bring her perspective to the tables where changes can be made to benefit all. Yversha has been an active participant on many boards, such as the Advisory Board for the Community Youth Development at Nazareth College, and currently serves as Relationship Manager at United Way of Greater Rochester, where she raises funds that support not-for-profit programming in her community. As a homeowner and a new mother who also lives in the Northwest, she is committed to ensuring her community stays as safe and vibrant as possible. She is the first Latina elected to Monroe County Legislature and is bringing her unique perspective to county government. We also have Lammis Vargas. Lammis's work in public service is not freshly new. She also worked for Mayor Donald Grebin in the city of Pawtucket as the mayor's liaison. Alongside the mayor, she assisted with the boards and commissions of the city, where her role was to diversify and engage city residents to be involved and continue to move the city forward with the administration. Lammis was elected in 2018 to the Cranston City Council and is the first woman of color ever to serve on the council, where she represents the Ward 1 community. She has been an advocate for diversity and champion for the quality of life the residents deserve. In addition, she is very passionate and truthfully believes in giving back to the community. It is due to this why she volunteers countless hours of her time as a member of various boards and commissions. At age 35, Lammis is a cancer survivor, a YMCA Live Strong participant, and a resident of Cranston, Rhode Island. She is of Colombian descent, born and raised in Central Falls, Rhode Island, holds a bachelor's degree in justice studies from Rhode Island College, and she is an hermana of Sigma Lambda Upsilon, Señoritas Latinas Unidas sorority. She enjoys reading, listening to music, and spending time with her family and friends, and is happily married and a mother of 2. So without further ado, we'll be able to hear from each of these women, and then we'll move into questions. So Yversha, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you to my hermanas of Sigma Lambda Upsilon, Señoritas Latinas Unidas Sorority Incorporated, as well as She Should Run. I'm excited to be here to talk about the reality and necessity of having women, Latinas, in elected office, specifically when it comes to having women within local roles. Oftentimes when we talk about government, we're talking about larger roles. People are more interested in talking about the president, for example, but often don't really take the time to reflect on the things that are impacting their quality of life. So I look forward to having that discussion today. Before we do that, just a little bit about myself. As was mentioned, I am Monroe County Legislator. I'm actually the minority leader for the Democratic caucus here. I was elected in January 2020, so very recent, but have done a lot within the county prior to that. And I'm a social worker by trade, a youth worker by heart, and I continue to strive to ensure that our community is focusing on the issues that are most important to ensure that our families are being supported within the Greater Rochester area. If you're not familiar with the Greater Rochester area, I'm just going to provide a little bit of background. So we are one of the metropolitan areas in upstate New York that is plagued by poverty. So we're seen as, one of the poorest places in the nation for children, with about 50% of young children living in poverty who live within the Greater Rochester area. So that's huge, and I kind of bring that reality to county government. So my perspective is a little different, and I can't wait to continue to share that with you all. But it's different because it comes from what I like to share as being a perspective of living in two worlds. And what I mean by that is Rochester, New York has one of the most segregated communities in our nation. Right? So you have a hub of poverty, and then about 7 minutes down the road, you have one of the most wealthiest suburbs in America. I was granted the opportunity to really become a part of both realities through my upbringing. So how did that happen for me? I was provided with the opportunity to receive an educational scholarship to attend private schools from 6th grade on. So I was the girl who lived in a community that was struggling, went to school, and realized that my friends at school, they also had issues. They had their own struggles as well, though they were vastly different and they were handled vastly different. There were still two very unique communities that needed support. And that kind of pivoted my state of mind and my awareness of my community and my gust to try to create change. So thank you again so much for having me, and I look forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Yversha. And then Lammis, we'll go ahead and hear from you.
So thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. I too want to thank my hermanas of Sigma Lambda Upsilon, Señorita Latinas Unidas Incorporated, as well as She Should Run organization, which is extremely important to have organizations such as this one here in our great country. I also want to say Happy Heritage Hispanic Month to everyone. As stated, pretty much in my introduction, I'm a daughter of immigrants. Parents immigrated from Colombia to the United States in 1971, and started working in the manufacturing company. I grew up in a household where my parents were both working 2 jobs and trying to make ends meet. And at the time in the state of Rhode Island, the manufacturing textile industry was extremely huge. It was fast and growing. However, in the early 90s, it started actually just vanishing. And so I grew up in pretty much in a low-income family household where, we actually, as much as my parents worked, it was tough to sometimes make ends meet. And so, although I grew up in a small city, the smallest city of the state of Rhode Island, which is Central Falls, about 10 years ago, I ended up moving to the city of Cranston. And that's where I was elected in 2018 as city councilwoman here in the city of Cranston. Backtracking a little bit, a graduate of Rhode Island College, as stated, where I went into focus in criminal justice. I work as the Unclaimed Property Director for the State Treasurer's Office, and I'm also the Program Coordinator for Government and Policy for Roger Williams University. For me, I've been working in public service. I've been working for elected officials since the age of 23. And it is extremely important for me to give back to the community who has given back so much to me in exchange. and for that reason is why I'm here today. City of Cranston, just as everybody knows, is the second largest city of the state of Rhode Island being the smallest state in the country. And we have a population about maybe 85, 89,000 people, of which was recorded in the census 10 years ago. The particular area that I actually represent is rather interesting. It's a Ward 1 part of Cranston, of where we have a financial bracket where one part of that ward is has pretty much, it has 2 Title I schools, families who are really in need, condensed area, 2-3 family homes, and at the same time, just streets or blocks away, I represent also an area where there's $2 million homes, and in the state of Rhode Island, $2 million home is, it's quite expensive, and so representing 2 different dynamics and backgrounds is extremely important for me, because I grew up in an area where, in a section where financial assistance was much needed in my house. So to be the voice for that area, to be the voice for people who live in my backyard has been extremely important. So I'm here obviously, today to just share a little bit, not only about my background, but we will go on more in details a little bit about the questions, I assume, as to what we're doing and how to get more Latinas elected and engaged.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much again for being here, for sharing part of your story, and for taking the leap and running for office. I know that you have busy lives, different things that claim your attention, and I think this is such a worthy cause to come to public service. So Yversha, we'll have you join us again. So as was stated at the beginning of this, this year, Sigma Lambda Upsilon is focusing on nosotros la gente, we the people, and with that, political literacy. And I'm curious, what did developing that political awareness, political literacy look like for both of you?
Thank you. That's really a great question. So I'd say political awareness really started maybe when I was about 20 or 21, and I decided to start working on campaigns. I've been working on campaigns for about 15 years. It was really just a few individuals within the greater Rochester community that I believed in. I believed in their mission, their vision, them as individuals and what they wanted to do for our community. So I started walking door to door. I started canvassing. I enjoyed canvassing. My very first job was in outreach. So it kind of just was a reflection of what I did in the past at 15. So I walked door to door, got to know neighbors from all different parts of the community, and really enjoyed it. So I worked on campaigns up until I decided to run. But what I can say is that I never worked on campaigns, or I didn't decide to run because it was something that my family was fully aware of. I mean, it wasn't even something that I was fully aware of, right? So the reality is that around my dining room table, we didn't talk politics. My mother decided to start voting when I started voting. So it was really just a leap that I took because I, as a community organizer, as a social worker, quickly realized that there was only so much I could do on the micro level of things. So when I was doing one-on-one work, I enjoyed doing that kind of work, but quickly understood that I had to do macro level work. I had to be in the rooms where policies were being made that were impacting my community. So I kind of just kept on that trajectory, and I am where I am because of that.
I love that. I feel like with the popularity of Hamilton, so many people are now saying, I want to be in the room where it happens. But I think that there's so much to that there are decisions being made that impact us, that impact your communities, that impact the people that you were serving as a social worker. And having a voice at tables where decisions are being made that impact those lives is so valuable and so important. I love the connection you made to see that your voice was needed there.
Absolutely.
Lammis, was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
So very similar to actually Yversha, at a very young age, I actually got involved through a summer program. And so kind of going back to my family background, where summer programming was a huge need. They were at work. I couldn't be home by myself. I participated into a nonprofit organization called Progreso Latino in the city. And what they did was, it was actually the year, one of the census, during the census time. And a part of the summer program was going door knocking. and with some of the adults of whom they were hiring to make sure that everybody gets counted. And so I started door knocking and kind of understanding like, what's the census? That's when I came to find out when I was about 13, 14 years old or so. And then in addition to that, that same program continued throughout the fall, and they had federal grant. And through that federal grant, one of the federal grants, what it was, is to make sure that you also were able to have a tour, bring the students, teenagers to your state house and tour your state house and find out what is a legislator, what is the governor, what is the secretary of state, and so forth. And so I testified for the very first time on an anti-tobacco bill. And so I went in for us, we were supposed to just kind of go and shadow and take a look at the process. And me being Lammis, I ended up just chiming in and testifying when they asked who's here to testify. And that was the first time ever, and that was a big eye opener, a huge eye opener for myself, and making sure that I wanted to definitely speak up on issues that I knew were affecting the community. Very much like Yversha as well. For my parents, it was language was a barrier. So I was somewhat of their interpreter and messenger to message the whole information about what is going on in the country, what's going on locally, and that we need to get involved. So when my mother became a US citizen, I was just about 17 years old. And so when she went to vote for the first time, I went with her. And ever since then, that's something that it's very instilled, that I make sure that, Mom, you're voting. These are the people that are going to be in the ballot, but most importantly, educate yourself. And I take my kids with me till this day. So
I love that, especially like we've talked about how being involved, being on the streets of our communities, talking to people, learning about the issues that are happening or advocating for the ones that we really care about can be such a thrust forward in our own political journey. But you also mentioned this piece of being the liaison, making sure that if there's a language barrier that you can fill that gap, because sometimes the people running aren't doing that for us, and making sure that there's information share and involvement from the people who live in the communities. And as we were talking about that, this was a question that came up as people were going through the registration. And honestly, one I've thought about a lot because it's happened in my life is showing up and walking through life as a Latin person. There are often comments that I've received, and I know others do, of like, wow, you speak English so well. Where did you learn English? Or, okay, I get it, you're from Rhode Island, but like, where are you really from? And I'm curious how both of you have navigated questions or assumptions like that as you're running for office, this assumption that you're foreign, even though you're local and are trying to take up space in an elected position. So I don't know if anyone wants to go first, but that's something that I think is really important for us to talk about.
Sure, I'll actually go first. That's an interesting, topic there, because I get that all the time. And when they're like, oh, but where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from here. And they're like, but where? I'm like, I'm from Rhode Island. They're like, really? But where? And then I'm like, well, I'm here in Cranston. No, like, but where are you from? And I'm like, I'm American. Because I don't want to sometimes, as proud as I am on my culture and my tradition, I want them to make sure that they know that that doesn't matter for me sometimes. I mean, it's important, but for me, it's kind of like a stereotyping, but where are you from? And not to get off topic, but it's the very same thing, whether it's like, oh, I love your complexion. I love your hair. You look so different than you did last week. And so sometimes honestly, that frustrates me sometimes. And they're like, where are you from? And you're Latino and you speak English very well. Where did you learn it from? Or you have no accent, which I still think I do, right? But still, it's one of those things that we're going to continue to get it, and it's something that we need to work on. But sometimes I have to react in a certain way to say I'm American just as you are, and I'm here to knock on your door and say, this is why I'm running. These are the issues, and I'm sure my issues may not relatively be exactly your issues, but how do we work together and kind of bypass the whole just being a Latina? But I'm here to make sure that we can all work together.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you just acknowledging the frustration. I mean, as you can see, like my nostrils flaring, because so much of what you've shared is a shared frustration. And I think it's important to acknowledge, like, this is frustrating, but the grounding and the bringing it back to, this is why I'm running. I have real reasons. And let's be grounded in that foundation of why I'm here, instead of you trying to distance me from that by talking about these other things. I don't know if there's other experiences or ideas that you would add to that, Yversha.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It definitely is an interesting question because it's not something that you hear on the other side, right? So you never walk into a room and hear a white man being asked, where are you from? Where are your parents from? Please tell me more about your heritage. But sometimes I do that now, right? So if I'm if I'm in a conversation where maybe my name is questioned, right? Yversha, ooh, can I call you Y? Can I call you E? I'm quick to respond with, can I call you B or C? To kind of see how that feels, right? So kind of sit in that uncomfortable state because I love my name. I love what it means. I love the story behind it. And we can definitely talk about that, but I think it starts, those microaggressions start in something as simple as a name. So I've really been able to kind of start those discussions because they're necessary, right? So you talked a little bit about language. Why it's important for us to be at the table is because when you don't have to navigate those spaces, you're not thinking about policy in those areas, right? So just recently we founded the Monroe County Language Access Coalition because no one before was really talking about how difficult it is to navigate these spaces. So there's just a plethora of different examples that I can give on having to combat a lot of different issues because of my sex or because of my ethnicity that people don't often realize are there.
Completely. And I love that you brought this back to policy, right? That someone who's lived in this world, who has friends and family in this world, can then advocate for the right policy to make sure that these experiences are accounted for and that there is opportunity and legislation in their favor. And I think that's an important piece too. I hope there are people listening who find this really valuable. It took me until I was 30 years old to even go by my full name, Jarinet, which is, there's a rolled R and it's intimidating. And it's also a huge part of who I am, but there's so much opportunity or invitation to diminish who we are in order to be able to occupy space. And I love what you shared, Yversha, of just like throwing that back and acknowledging that that's inappropriate and that I have every right to be respected. And if you want to talk about honoring my culture, I'm here for that, but we will not be diminishing it. And I think that's just so important. Thank you. I am just loving this. I am so excited to have you both here today. Thank you for me personally, but also for being here with this group. Again, if you have questions that you want us to include, I would encourage you to use the Q&A box, so I'll be able to pull from that. This next question, actually, we received a variety of versions of this question during the registration. A lot of people were interested on this topic, so I kind of brought a bunch of questions together to answer the main theme, which was focused on what can we do to build more unity and understanding between Black and Brown communities? There's been a lot of racial justice conversation focused primarily around Black Lives Matter, which I think has brought a lot of attention to how there are divides. And how do we make sure that we are offering similar support to the Latin community? And also recognizing that there are Afro-Latinx people, that there are people who cross the boundaries of Latin or Black and also LGBTQ. So there's a lot of dimensions to this. But we were specifically asked a lot about what can Black people be doing to support Hispanic or Latin people, and how can we bring better understanding to the overall racial marginalization in elected office. Again, if either of you wants to jump in, feel free.
Sure. So can you guys hear me? Okay, sorry, thank you. So that's been a huge concern. I've been actually getting a lot of questions, a lot of via email, or it's a question that comes up when I'm even door knocking, right? And not necessarily, not even from the Latino community or even the African American community, or so it's more even just it's a broad question that I'm starting to get more from everyone. And how do we work together, and how do we bring everyone in? And for me, it's more of like, listen, when I discuss policy, when I think of things that we're going to be able to work on, it's a policy that I try to make sure, like, how is this going to engage the entire community and bring in one? The last thing that we want to do is obviously be separated and continue to be categorized, whether you're a Latino, an Afro-Latino, you're Black, or you're not dark enough to be a Latino, you know, are you Latino? Wow, you're so white with blue eyes, you know, or the other way around. And so for us, it's making sure that we have, so what we've been doing is we've been actually having conversations. We have, in the city of Cranston, we have a diversity commission that started last year. And what we did was earlier this year, as a matter of fact, in January, was that we disseminated a survey out to PTAs over at the schools, wanted to make sure that it was disseminated out to members of our community, to employees of the city, municipalities, and just families in general. So that way we can kind of listen and hear out what are the needs in the community, where can we work on, you know. And one of the things that was very, very disheartening and heartbreaking for me was that many people didn't feel welcomed. And when I kind of started getting a list of the responses, it was like, there's no unity. And as an elected official, I really feel that that is one of my jobs, to make sure that everybody feels welcome and that we work together, because policies that are being done and policies that have happened, ordinance and laws that are passing, we need to make sure, kind of like what Yversha said, you know, we need to be at the table. We need to have a seat at the table, and we shouldn't be asking to be at the table, right? Our statewide government, from US senators, Congress to governors and state legislators, should be already letting us know we need to work together. So with the whole division, it's of making sure that we continue to have conversations, whether it's with our police department and other public safeties, and continue to have community meetings. That has been extremely important since I've been elected, to bring everyone together and know that their concerns may be the same concerns of the Latinos or the Black communities, but at the end of the day, right? As Latinos, we have a lot of Latinos have also been discriminated against, right? And so it's an issue that has been may not be as long as the African American community in our country, but we do face that as well. And how do we make sure that we work together on that huge struggle, and have, in my case, we've been working with at least our police department on diversity training, and not diversity training now, but also training that's been ongoing, and continue to do that. And having a diversity officer in a city for us is something that we're actually kind of working on at the same time.
Absolutely. And because this was such a frequently asked question for this particular webinar, I just want to highlight again something you said about the Diversity Commission. These commissions exist in so many cities. So if you are one of those people who put this question forward, or this is an issue that rings close to home for you, know that that's a commission that you can get involved with in your own city and be involved in the decisions and the conversations that are happening in your hometown for how this is addressed. Yversha, I saw you nodding along. I didn't know if there was something you wanted to add to that question.
Sure. Yeah. Well, just kind of piggyback on what you just said in regards to commissions, just boards, committees, commissions, just in general. Right, if you're not even able to, for some reason, be a part of the commission, a lot of these commissions, boards have work groups. So kind of, you know, introducing yourself, getting a feel for a work group and understanding the work might be one of the first steps on you becoming a voice in a really important space. But to go back to the question in regards to building unity and understanding, one of the places where I often start is in acknowledging my own personal privilege, right? So my own personal privilege, being a light-skinned, cisgendered, heterosexual woman, and what that brings, and how I can, with my privilege, bring people into these conversations. But also acknowledging the fact that because of some of those realities of who I am also still, you know, I will never be considered a white woman. Right, so there are still struggles that I have because of my who I am and how America responds to me. So, you know, acknowledging my privilege, but also acknowledging the realities of my perspective and where that comes from. And then overall, just going forward and trying to acknowledge our history, our joint history as Brown and Black people, and how we can continue to fight a system that was built to keep us down, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you came in with that acknowledging of your privilege. And I do feel like I have this imagery of a bridge, right? So there are connections that you have that allow you to advocate and be listened to, but there's also connections that you have that are true and firsthand experience with the marginalization, and being able to use that privilege to be a bridge builder and to bring these things to light, and to use them as you're running for office as well. I'm seeing lots of questions come through, so I want to make sure we are able to answer those. I know we're moving kind of quickly, but I'm really excited about the enthusiasm all of you are bringing to this conversation. One that we got, and this is a very common question we receive at She Should Run, is can you share a little bit about your experience, challenges, advice around fundraising for a campaign? It's something that can cause a lot of anxiety for people who are maybe considering the possibility. Just being able to hear someone talk about what their experience was like, I think can be really helpful. I think we did Lammis first last time, so Yversha, if you want to go first this time.
Okay, so I'm a facilitator for a program called Women Elect, and it's kind of a stepping stone for women who are considering to run for office. It's a 13-week program, and often women come to us, and that's the number one outside of even deciding to run, right? So if you're not aware, on average, it takes a woman 7 times to be asked to run for office before she decides to run. So just getting to the point where you want to run is really difficult, and that takes courage. But fundraising, I'm not from wealth, right? But I decided to run, and I was blessed with the courage, the gall to be able to ask, and that's takes time. That takes training. Actually, I'm a fundraiser in my day job now. I've been a fundraiser for going on 4 years. And I decided to do that work because I wanted to see what it felt like to walk into a room and ask for a lot of money to support an organization. I knew people were doing it, and I knew people were comfortable with doing it, and I wanted to see what that felt like, right? So before I came to my job, I thought asking for $10 was a lot of money, and that's not the case anymore. So I provided myself the opportunities to be exposed to making asks. One of the things that I would say that most people don't do before they decide to run is create something called a life list, where you literally put everyone down that you've ever known in your whole life. You download it from Facebook, you download it from everywhere, and you'd realize that, you do have a network. For the hermanas on the webinar today, I put out calls. I asked for $19.87, right? Please support me. $19.87. It's the year we were founded. I need your help and support. And from calls like that to my hermandad, to calls like that for my friends, et cetera, I was able to raise $30,000 by $20, at a time, right? Because my network wasn't and isn't deep pocketed. It's possible. It takes time, and it takes a little bit of courage, but it's definitely possible.
Absolutely. I love that focusing, right? That we don't have to only assume that we can run if we have deep pockets in our network, that it can be done in these small dollar donations, and that those really are a manifestation of investment, not just in you as a person, but in all the ideas and the advocacy and the work that you'll be doing in the position that you're running for. And I always find that to be a huge vote of confidence from the community as well.
Yeah, and it can also,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And it can also be done with limited resources too. I've run twice, and it can be done. It absolutely can be done.
Lammis, anything that you wanted to add?
Sure. So as I said, I've been in public service for well over 15 years and working for an elected official and being one of 2 totally different things. So it's so much easier for me to tell my bosses and say, you needed a call. Have you called 5 people today? You need to hop on the phones. It's 7 o'clock. You should have been on the phone at 6 o'clock and gone all the way through 8. When I'm in the hot seat, it's so different because I hate asking for money. And eventually I had to put myself in that hot seat. And pretty much as Yversha said, right, it's going down to your entire network list, whether it is from the hermandad in the sorority, whether it's from people that you've known as from your childhood, boards and commissions that you've served with before. And for me, it was also making sure that I was looking for organizations out there that where my values and my platform match, and any type of organizations that were actually had a PAC, I was submitting also for endorsement. And sometimes it actually came with a, with a donation, and sometimes not money, could have been a donation of just volunteers, but that is just as important as it is with money as well. But definitely fundraising is a huge setback for many people, and women, of course, particularly when, you also have limited cash to begin with, or if you have a family, or you just don't know where to start, and then the process in itself. So I think that a lot of the trainings that are taking place, at least for Rhode Island and definitely nationally, trying to encourage women to run, usually tend to focus on fundraising at the same time, or at least there is a segment part of it on don't be afraid to ask, whether it's a $19.87, when it was my birthday, I'm like, I'm turning whatever age I was turning at that point, and I put it out there. And this year has been very tough. I have to tell you, it's we're obviously going through a pandemic, and unemployment is at the highest peak. And for me, I didn't even want to ask for money. And, but who tends to somewhat be able to, that you can ask. And there are folks that I say, I'm not even going to ask them. So it's been rather hard, but it's definitely doable. That's at least that's my theory behind it.
Absolutely. And you both acknowledge the idea of resources as well. And so sometimes maybe we don't feel comfortable asking for a financial donation, or the person, we ask them and they're not able to. I've heard so many stories of people being able to respond to that with, okay, but would you be willing to post about me on your social media? Or do you want to knock doors with us this weekend? Or also being that proactive person saying like, hey, I would love to be able to serve in this way, or I will make 5 phone calls tonight to my friends and family to let them know that you're running, and recognizing that there's a variety of ways to get involved and offer support when running. And to
absolutely, I think that's one thing, if you don't mind me interjecting, is that men sometimes have the ability to just ask right away without a problem. And as women, sometimes we fall a little bit back, we're a little timid, we're not sure whether we should ask another woman. And I think once you get it in the gist of it, it's just asking. We have to be bold and ask just as everybody else is.
Yep, absolutely. And again, thank all of you for submitting your questions. I'll get through as many of these as I can. So this comes from someone who's going to have a lot of experiences similar to both of you. She says she's a physician. She also has a background in health policy and advocacy, and is trying to decide what to run for and how to start campaigning to get the coalition when you have a full-time job and you're a mother. How do you make that happen? What did you both do? Lammis, if you want to pick up.
Sure. So I get it. I'm a mother too. I'm married. I have a dog. I have a city council, my daytime job. I don't know how I have another job. So it's like 3 jobs in a row. How do we multitask it? And it's kind of like, we're all Wonder Women, and we can do it. We can manage it somehow, but we can all do it. There is a will behind us. I think as far as the question in the sense of where to go, if you're looking or thinking of running for office, right? I would, in my case, I did a lot of my homework and where there was a need, and also the experience that I have and where I was going to be the best fit. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best fit, but at least making sure that I know what is the foundation. For me, it was starting local. That's where I personally wanted to make sure that I had an impact, whether it was from a stop sign, one-way sign, whether it's just to making sure that we don't have, particularly, I'm just going to say an issue of high capacity magazines in our schools, right? Those are issues that some of them were at the local level, and that I knew that I wanted to make a difference from there. As a council person, I wanted to make sure that I had a one-to-one with the people, and not to say that you can't if you're not on the council. So that's kind of where I went. And I would say with whether you have a health background, if you feel that you make a better fit with it's in the health in the legislation area where you can perhaps make some changes. But most importantly is do your homework, find out first. It's kind of, if you haven't already, right, is who represents you right now and where do they stand on health issues? Do you agree on those health issues, whether it's your council member, if they haven't voted a certain way that you disagree with, whether it's on the legislator side, even on the federal side, right? And so it's trying to figure out where they stand on the health issues or any other issues that you align yourself with is extremely important, because if you feel that person is not representing you, or the people who you really feel should be represented, that might be a pocket to get into.
Absolutely. I love that. Using our proactive energy, but also our talents and time to do that analysis of our representatives behaving in a way that we think is appropriate based on our study and knowledge and profession.
Correct.
Absolutely. I would say, start doing some of the work now. And this is for anyone who's kind of thinking about running for office. Start networking. And I know right now it's a very hard time to do some of that, but attend some of the Zooms, attend some of the fundraisers via online, start meeting people in different parts of government, and kind of see where you feel that you fit the best. And I'd say if you keep showing up, someone may start to tap you, right? Someone might start to say, have you thought about running for office? You would be a great X, Y, and Z. But if you're not invited to run, that's okay too. Oftentimes, if people don't see someone like you in those positions, you're not going to be tapped. But I would say start by attending fundraisers, start by meeting and networking with individuals, and know that oftentimes as women, we won't apply for that job, right? So when we think about interviews and work life in general, we choose not to apply for something because we don't feel that we are 100% prepared. But that's not what happens with our counterparts. So that's what I would say. I'd say, start getting in the rooms, and go for it.
Absolutely. For those of you who are curious about this topic more specifically, She Should Run, we did a webinar a few months back. It was part of our Road to Run series, and we talked about balance, and some stories were shared during that time of how bringing your kids to knock doors with you, or sharing a load with a partner, or acknowledging when you have to say no and set boundaries. So if you're interested in more on that theme, I would highly recommend checking out that webinar. We can get the link for you in the chat. Going forward, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I want to answer that part because about family and balance and deciding to run and being women. One of the things, and this is, if you're a mother, they tell you ask for what you need. When you run for office, you may not know what you need, and I think I was honored to already have run for office twice. And the first time I ran, I'll just give an example of my mother. First time I ran, my mother was knocking doors with me. She was with me all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And I had conversations with my family in regards to what I thought were the supports I needed. My second time around, I was able to kind of sit down and have those conversations. So you have to have a conversation with your family, with your partner, with your kids if you're able to. And my mom was like, I hated walking doors. I hated it. How can I help you? So my mom would show up every Friday, and I'm not ashamed to say this. My mom would show up every Friday because I wouldn't knock doors, and we would clean my house together. And that was the best help I could have for my campaign. I didn't have to worry about it on Saturdays and Sundays, and my mom didn't have to worry about knocking on doors and people asking her questions. So really finding out how you can be best supported will really help in the long run.
No, I think that's great. Thank you for sharing the personal story. I think it adds so much understanding of I'm a real person who ran for office and serves in office, but I am a real person, and that took real accommodations to make those things happen. So that kind of shifts the conversation from running for office to serving in office. The question being, has there ever been a time when you've been in a room where you feel like people aren't listening to you or that you can't be heard? And what did you do to make your voice heard and to kind of navigate that situation so that you could share what you wanted to? I think
Yeah.
we started with Lammis last time. If you wanted to go again, it sounded like you were.
Sorry. Yversha, totally up to you. Okay. It's happened. Absolutely, it's happened as an elected official, where I have introduced an ordinance per se, and it's an ordinance that's not very well taken. Whether most of the time it's mostly on the other party's end, where they have not. Oops. Hello. Oh, hello.
Yep, we're here.
Oh,
All
I'm
good.
sorry. My phone was ringing. I apologize. It went right into my Mac. I apologize for that. Yeah, so there's been ordinance or so. The majority of time is usually the opponent party who has pretty much been against it. For me, it's been making sure that I have the facts with me, right? If I'm introducing something, why am I introducing it? Why is there a need for it? What can we do? Is there a finance or fiscal responsibility that comes with it that would impact the actual city? And so being prepared is extremely important. However, sometimes it can be as prepared as one could be, and you're still going to be looked at like, what are you doing and why are you doing this for? For me, it has also been important that anytime I'm introducing, for the majority of the time, 99% of the time, I will let the members, the residents, the constituency know this is what's coming before us at the next city council meeting. This, I explain it. And if you'd like to, right now, because of obviously COVID, we've had Zoom meetings, city council meeting, is here's the Zoom number, chime in, testify. This is what it's going to affect you in this way. And if you're in favor and supportive of this, please call in. It's important for the people of the community to engage and understand what's happening in their own backyard. And when you have a council, in this case, it's 9-member city council, and they see the overwhelming amount of support for a particular ordinance, that could be quite an interesting movement right there happening, right? And again, sometimes it still doesn't go your way. It can be vetoed, and it has been, say, by the mayor's office. You win some, you lose some, right? But the fight doesn't stop there. You need to continue the momentum, and you continue it going. And I'm able to at least put my head on my pillow at night and be able to sleep and know, you know what? I may have not felt welcome, or as a woman, or whatever the case may be, it didn't go through, but I know that I fought hard and advocated for the issues that I stand for. So
I love that. I love bringing the community in to echo your voice and call people to the mat. If this is something that will serve well, I think that's a great strategy. I really appreciate you sharing that. Yversha, if there's something you wanted to add.
I mean, I think we have to understand that we are still kind of pioneers, right? So we are not in the same state of mind as some of our peers. So oftentimes what we're talking about or what we're interested in presenting or discussing isn't what other people are thinking about, right? So what I've learned is that you have to do the work. You have to be consistent, and you have to be able to do the work when individuals are choosing to not kind of support you, in essence. This last time when I ran for office, I absolutely ran unsupported by anyone in a position of political power within my community. And every single conversation I had was, if you could tell me or show me another Latina who is going to make it to county leg soon, then maybe I won't run. But because you don't understand how important this is, I'm going to continue to forge ahead. Not only because the Latino community in Rochester thinks this is important, but a large group of individuals think that representation matters. And it's not just about identity politics. This is about a community that needs a voice, and we're gonna forge ahead. I'm gonna forge ahead. So it's really in learning to be comfortable with yourself, because at times it can be extremely lonely, as an example, but it's kind of what we're signed up for.
I love the word you chose to use of pioneer, of like recognizing there are trails that have yet to be blazed, and it's part of the work that you're doing in addition to being an elected official and all of the duties, responsibilities there is setting a standard for representation, setting a standard for having women's voices being heard, setting a standard for what those expectations should be, but maybe aren't right now. And I'm sorry, Lammis, because I cut you off.
No, it's okay. It's actually, you said a perfect word, which was standards, right? Having a standard for it as women. So I'm not sure about Yversha, but as far as the city council in Cranston goes, for the first year and a half, I was the only woman on the city council. And to be the only woman with, 8 out of 9 to get your point across sometimes, or making sure that I raised my hand, that I touched the microphone button and waved or whatever I had to do to make sure that I was able to chime in or testify in a comment on a certain issue was extremely important for me. And I think as far as City of Cranston also goes, is that there's never been a woman of color. So being the first one was a huge, I think, breaking barriers. And I know there was a lot of trailblazers ahead of me, but is making sure that I was not going to stay shut on an issue. And especially as a Latina, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep going and advocate for whatever I believe is right. And once I get started, I'm like, I won't end it until I'm like, oh, they're like 2 minutes is done. I'm like, okay, fine. But that was extremely important. It has been important for me. But I have to say that luckily, I've been very welcomed by everyone, but it doesn't happen to every woman sometimes when you come into an office where there's a group of men or men in a room.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this will be our last question to round us out. Is there's probably people on this call who are maybe curious about running for office, but not for them right now, maybe not for them ever. Well, we'll see. Things are up in the air. What advice would you have for women who've not made that decision yet, but are curious about this space and would like to know more?
I think I kind of said it earlier. Start to network, start to meet people who are in this space, start to understand a little bit more about county or city or wherever you are, government, and understand that a lot of the issues that you are most bothered and perplexed by are local issues, right? So childcare, or your street being plowed, or a stop sign like Lammis is saying, or one-way signs, speed bumps, your child's education, your cousin's education. Start to identify a passion, right? And understand how that passion is linked to local government, and get in the room, start having the conversation.
I love that, especially since we have this topic of political literacy. There's so many things that all of us are passionate about, but maybe we aren't making the connection to, wait a minute, this could be impacted by government, especially local government. I love that invitation. Thank you so much for that, Yversha. Lammis, bring us home.
Yeah. So absolutely, I'm echoing exactly what Yversha has said, right? This is my 3rd time running, and what I always say is that I look at the younger generation. I have a daughter, I have a young son, and I want to make sure that children, like my kids, just our children in general, are able to picture themselves, right? They need role models. So we need to encourage other Latinas and just women to run as well, right? And we want to make sure that we are role models, that if they see a woman walking through City Hall hallways, because they're council members, that they can do it too. They see women walking through the state house, that they can be legislators or governors one day, that if they see on TV as they turn on, Washington DC has women representing us, right? They can be, one of them as well, right? And so for me, that's a passion. Kind of what Yversha again is saying was, right? Find your passion, get involved. Boards and Commission was just mentioned earlier, right? That is a great way to get involved. Know who your elected officials are. Sometimes there are appointments by mayors. Sometimes there are appointments that are by the governor or your legislators, or every state works a little bit different. Boards and Commission are a huge foundation. Something that I've actually been working really hard on, making sure that we diversify that, because there's not a lot of women on them as well. But finding a passion in your niche for that is extremely important. But making sure that we, look at organizations that are training women for politics. That's like she run, right? It's one of those things that are extremely important. Just training opportunities, because we do certainly need more women to run. You noted earlier that there was, I think, was it 2% of a total of elected officials across, I think, was it Congress or across this,
Yeah, it's across Congress, state legislature, state executives.
absolutely. And I want to say that maybe there's like 17% of Latinas, and I'm speaking as far as just Latinas in general, just because of the fact that we're in Hispanic heritage month, right? And so there's about 70% Hispanic, Latinas, and where 2% of those actually probably represent women in Congress. That's still very slim. We need to get up there, and we are slowly, but we will. And so for any women, for every woman, for each and every one that's on this call who is kind of thinking about it, like Yversha said, sometimes you need to be asked 7, 8, 9 times, right? And if you haven't been asked, absolutely find your niche, find your passion for it. But we need women to run, and politics doesn't come easy. And that's one thing that I'll leave it at, is having thick skin and having a family and multitasking, because sometimes there'll be things written in the newspaper and so forth. So make sure that when you're going in for it, it's not easy, right? We all know life is not easy, but it's definitely been an interesting and hard, not easy easy journey for me. But don't let that be a burden. Run for office.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. We are so honored to have you. We're going to invite Izzy and Roxy back from SLU. But I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Ladies, thank you for attending, for taking time out of your evenings to participate in this. We do have a very short evaluation. We put the link in the chat. We'll also have it for when you close out. Please take a moment to fill that out. We just want to make sure we're delivering the best resources for you. I also want to make sure that Isabel has a chance to speak, since this is the kickoff to Raices Week, so I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. So thank you both, hermanas, for sharing your stories and sharing a little bit about yourselves. It was amazing. I hope this empowers everyone on the call to run for office or do their little piece along the way. So yes, we are kicking off our race this week. It kicks off today, actually. So we're very fortunate in having She Should Run help us in just starting the amazing week. And so if you believe in She Should Run's mission, if you believe in their work, we invite you to make a generous donation. We are hosting a national fundraiser as part of race this week. And so I'll drop the link in the chat. And so anyone who feels empowered to do so, please do support their work in getting more women, especially Latinas, in office.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Isabel. So again, the donation link is going to be in the chat. The evaluation link is in the chat. If you want to continue this conversation and join with more women who are interested about politics and moving things forward, we encourage you to participate in the She Should Run community. We have more than 22,000 women there who are all exploring this journey along with you. I am often in there. If you ever want to talk to me, I'm also available. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I hope that you participate in Raices, and we will see you at another event soon.